The day began like any other, quiet and ordinary, with nothing to suggest how fast everything would change. The girl stepped out into the open space, carrying only what she needed for the day. She moved with calm confidence, used to minding her own business and staying focused on her goals. People passed by without paying much attention, each lost in their own world. The air felt normal, almost peaceful. She had learned early in life to stay alert, not out of fear, but from experience. She knew how quickly words could turn sharp and looks could turn cold. Still, she believed that if she kept to herself, trouble would pass her by. She walked steadily, not rushing, not slowing down, just moving forward like she always did. Not far away, someone else stood watching. His posture was tense, his mood already dark. He had the kind of presence that made people uncomfortable without saying a word. He looked for reasons to feel powerful, for someone he believed he could control. When his eyes landed on the girl, something in him hardened. He stared longer than necessary, waiting for a reaction that never came. First, it was just words. Sharp, unwanted, thrown into the air like stones. He told her to leave, telling her she did not belong there. His voice carried, loud enough for others to hear. The girl stopped for a brief moment, feeling the weight of the words press against her chest. She did not respond. She did not argue. She simply took a breath and kept moving. That silence bothered him more than any reply could have. He took it as disrespect, as a challenge. His voice grew louder, filled with anger that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with his own bitterness. A few people nearby slowed their steps, sensing the tension, but no one spoke up yet. The girl felt eyes on her from every direction. Her heart beat faster, but she kept her head up. She reminded herself that she had done nothing wrong. She had every right to be there. She told herself that this moment would pass like others had before. But he stepped closer. The space between them disappeared too quickly. His shadow fell across her path, blocking the way forward. She finally looked at him, not with fear, but with confusion and quiet strength. She asked him to move, her voice steady and calm. She did not raise her tone. She did not insult him. She only asked for space. That request pushed him over the edge. The anger that had been building inside him spilled out. His face tightened, and his hands curled into fists. People around them froze, unsure of what to do. Some looked away, hoping the situation would resolve itself. Others reached for their phones, sensing something was wrong. The girl took a step back, feeling the shift in the air. She knew danger when she felt it. Still, she did not run. She believed that staying calm was the safest choice. Her thoughts raced, but her body stayed still. He shouted again, telling her to get out, louder than before. The words echoed, heavy and cruel. The girl felt a knot form in her stomach, but she stood her ground. She had faced harsh words before. She knew how to survive them. What she did not expect was how fast everything would turn physical. In a sudden burst of movement, he acted without thinking. The moment happened so quickly that some did not even realize what they had seen until it was over. The girl felt a sharp pain tear through her leg as she lost balance and fell. The ground met her hard, knocking the breath from her chest. A gasp rose from the crowd. Pain flooded her body, deep and overwhelming. She tried to move but couldn't. Her leg felt wrong, like it no longer belonged to her. Panic rushed in, but she fought to stay conscious, gripping the ground as she tried to breathe. The man stepped back, shock flashing across his face for just a second. Then he looked around, as if checking who had seen what he had done. His confidence returned quickly. He straightened his shoulders, telling himself he was untouchable. People finally rushed forward. Someone knelt beside the girl, asking if she could hear them. Another person shouted for help. The girl nodded faintly, tears slipping down her face, not from weakness, but from the pain and disbelief of it all. As she lay there, she thought about how fast normal could disappear. One moment, she was walking through her day. The next, she was on the ground, injured by someone who saw her as less than human. What no one there fully understood yet was that this moment would not end there. This was only the beginning. The girl was not alone, even if it felt that way right now. The choices made in the next few minutes would change many lives, including the man who believed he could walk away without consequences. The sound of distant engines had not yet reached them, but fate was already moving. Time seemed to slow after she hit the ground. Sounds blended together, voices overlapping, footsteps rushing closer. The girl lay there, staring up at the sky, trying to understand what had just happened. Her leg burned with pain, deep and sharp, and every small movement sent waves through her body. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out at first. Someone crouched beside her, speaking softly, telling her to stay still. Another person stood nearby, arguing loudly with the man who had hurt her. The crowd had grown now. People who had been passing by minutes earlier were suddenly witnesses, their faces filled with shock, anger, and guilt for not stepping in sooner. The man tried to act calm. He raised his hands slightly, saying it was not a big deal, that she had gotten in his way. His words sounded weak even to himself. He avoided looking at her, focusing instead on the crowd, searching for support that did not come. The girl finally found her voice, came out small and broken as she asked someone to call for help. Her hands trembled as she held her leg, afraid to look at it. Fear mixed with pain, and tears ran freely down her cheeks. She hated that moment of weakness, but her body refused to obey her strength. A phone rang somewhere. Someone said emergency services were on the way. The girl closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She thought about her family, about the people who cared for her. She wondered how she would explain what had happened, how she would walk again, how long the pain would last. The man shifted his weight from foot to foot. The confidence he had shown earlier was fading. He could feel the crowd turning against him. Whispers spread. People pointed. A few recorded quietly, knowing this moment mattered. Minutes passed slowly. The girl felt every second. Her leg throbbed, and she struggled to stay conscious. Someone placed a jacket under her head. Another person offered water, but she shook her head. She didn't trust her body enough to drink. As she lay there, she remembered lessons she had learned growing up. Stay calm. Observe. Survive the moment. She focused on breathing, counting silently, holding onto the thought that help was coming. The man tried to leave. Someone blocked his path, telling him to wait. He argued, raising his voice again, but it sounded desperate now. He glanced down the street, checking for a way out. He had not expected this many people to care. He had not expected consequences. A distant rumble reached the edge of the scene. At first, it was barely noticeable, like thunder far away. A few heads turned, confused. The sound grew louder, steadier, rolling through the street with a heavy presence. The girl heard it too. Even through the pain, she recognized the sound. Her eyes opened, and for the first time since she fell, something other than fear crossed her face. It was not relief yet, but recognition. The crowd noticed the change in her expression. The sound grew stronger. Engines. Many of them. The man stiffened. He turned slowly, his face draining of color as he looked toward the road. He knew that sound. Everyone did. The noise was impossible to ignore now, echoing off buildings, commanding attention. The first motorcycle came into view, then another, then several more. They moved together, controlled and steady, not rushed, not aggressive, just present, powerful. The girl swallowed hard, tears returning. This time mixed with emotion she couldn't explain. She knew she was not alone anymore. The man took a step back without realizing it. His breathing changed. The anger he had carried all day disappeared, replaced by something colder. Fear. People stepped aside as the riders approached. No one told them to. It happened naturally. The space opened like the street itself understood the shift. The motorcycle slowed, then stopped one by one. The engines idled, filling the air with a low, steady sound. The riders removed their helmets calmly. Their faces were serious, focused, not angry, not loud. One of them looked at the girl on the ground. His expression changed instantly. Concern replaced everything else. He moved toward her without hesitation, kneeling carefully so as not to scare her. He spoke gently, asking if she could talk, if she could breathe. She nodded, tears slipping again as she tried to answer. The presence of the group wrapped around her like a shield. The man who had hurt her stood frozen. He could not move. He could not speak. He suddenly understood that this moment was bigger than him, bigger than his anger, bigger than the choice he had made. The crowd watched in silence. Everyone felt it now. The balance had shifted. No threats were made. No one touched the man. They did not need to. One of the riders turned to the crowd and calmly asked who had seen what happened. Hands went up. Voices spoke. The truth began to form clearly, piece by piece. The girl lay there, holding on to the moment, holding on to the sound of engines, knowing that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. This was no longer just about what had happened. It was about what would happen next. The air felt different now, heavier but calmer at the same time. The engines continued to hum softly, not as a threat, but as a reminder that something had changed. The girl lay on the ground, surrounded by faces that no longer looked away. She felt pain, but she also felt seen. One of the riders stayed close to her, speaking in a low, steady voice. He told her help was on the way and that she was safe. She nodded again, her eyes blinking slowly as she fought exhaustion. Shock was setting in, and her body felt cold despite the warmth of the day. Someone from the crowd handed over a phone. A call was already being made. The rider gave short, clear details, his voice calm and respectful. He did not raise it. He did not rush. He knew that calm could steady fear better than noise. The man who had hurt her stood a few steps away, surrounded but untouched. He stared at the ground, then at the riders, then back at the girl. His earlier anger seemed distant now, like something he barely remembered. His thoughts raced. He replayed the moment again and again, wishing he could pull it back, wishing he had just walked away. People began speaking more freely now. Witnesses stepped forward, each adding a piece to what had happened. Their voices were firm. No one defended him. The truth stood clearly in the open. The girl listened quietly. She did not speak much. Every word cost energy she did not have. She focused on staying awake, on breathing through the pain that still pulsed through her leg. She felt hands steady her shoulders, reminding her she was not alone. Sirens could be heard in the distance now, soft at first, then clearer. Relief passed through the crowd like a shared breath. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound guide her thoughts forward. As they waited, one of the riders noticed the girl shivering. Without a word, he placed a jacket gently over her. The simple act brought tears back to her eyes. Not from pain this time, but from the kindness she did not expect from strangers. The man finally tried to speak. His voice cracked as he said he did not mean for things to go that far. His words hung in the air, empty and late. No one answered him. The riders did not argue with him. They did not threaten him. They simply watched, steady and silent. Their presence spoke louder than anything he could say. The girl thought about how strange it was that silence could feel so powerful. Just moments earlier, silence had made her feel small. Now it made her feel protected. The emergency vehicle arrived, lights flashing but sirens quieting as it pulled closer. Medical workers moved quickly but carefully. They knelt beside the girl, asking her questions, checking her leg, her breathing, her awareness. She answered as best she could, her voice soft but clear. They placed a support around her leg, careful not to cause more pain. She winced but stayed still. One of the riders held her hand while they worked. She squeezed back without thinking. The man was asked to step aside. Authorities began speaking with him, their tone serious. Witnesses stayed nearby, ready to speak again if needed. The truth had weight now, could not be ignored. As the girl was lifted onto a stretcher, she felt fear rise again. The movement hurt, and the reality of what had happened finally settled in. She cried openly now, no longer trying to be strong. One of the riders leaned close and told her she had done nothing wrong. The words mattered more than he knew. She nodded, holding on to them as tightly as she could. The crowd watched as she was moved toward the vehicle. Some people looked ashamed. Others looked angry. Many looked thoughtful, changed by what they had seen. The man watched too. His shoulders slumped. He finally understood that this moment would follow him. He could not walk away from it. The vehicle doors closed gently. The girl lay back, staring at the ceiling, listening as the engine started. Through the window, she could still see the riders standing there, watching, making sure she was not forgotten. As the vehicle pulled away, she felt a strange mix of fear and gratitude. Her leg was broken. Her day was shattered. But something else had been revealed too. She had learned that even in moments of deep pain, there could be people who stepped forward. People who refused to look away. People who reminded her that she mattered. Outside, the street slowly returned to motion. But for everyone who had been there, nothing felt quite the same. This was not the end of the story. It was only moving into its next chapter. The ride to the hospital felt longer than it really was. The girl stared at the ceiling as lights passed above her, one after another. Every small bump in the road sent a dull ache through her leg. She held onto the side of the stretcher, focusing on breathing, reminding herself that she was still here. A medical worker spoke gently, explaining what they were doing, asking simple questions to keep her awake. She answered slowly. Her voice sounded far away to her own ears. Shock wrapped around her like a fog, making everything feel unreal. When they arrived, the doors opened to a bright, busy space. She was rolled through hallways filled with hurried footsteps and low voices. People moved with purpose around her, but none of them felt rushed. They treated her with care, as if she mattered. She was taken into a room where doctors checked her leg carefully. They spoke to each other in calm tones, explaining the injury in simple words. She heard enough to understand that it would take time to heal. The thought scared her, but she nodded, trusting them. As they worked, her mind drifted back to the street. The sound of engines, the faces in the crowd, the way everything had changed so quickly. She wondered what was happening there now, if the man was still standing in the same spot, if people were still talking about what they had seen. Outside, not far from the hospital entrance, the riders waited. They did not crowd the doors. They stood together, quiet and patient. Some leaned against their bikes. Others watched the entrance, their faces serious. People passing by noticed them. Some whispered, some stared. But the riders did not react. They were there for one reason only. Inside, the girl was given medicine to ease the pain. The sharp edge dulled, replaced by a heavy tiredness. Her eyes closed and opened again. She felt herself drifting but fought it, afraid to let go completely. A nurse asked if there was anyone they could call for her. The girl gave a number, her voice barely above a whisper. As the call was made, her chest tightened. She hated being the reason someone else would worry. Time moved strangely after that. Moments stretched, then disappeared. When she woke again, her leg was supported and wrapped. The pain was still there, but it felt more distant now. She heard voices outside the room, calm, respectful. A doctor stepped in and explained that some people had arrived asking about her, wanting to make sure she was okay. The girl nodded slowly. She already knew who they were. One by one, a few of the riders were allowed to step inside briefly. They did not crowd her. They did not overwhelm her with words. Each one spoke softly, offering reassurance, telling her she was strong, telling her she was not alone. Tears rolled down her face again. She did not try to stop them this time. The kindness felt heavy, almost too much to carry after everything she had been through. Meanwhile, back at the street, the situation had settled into something quieter but more serious. Authorities spoke with witnesses again, collecting details, reviewing recordings. The story was clear. The truth did not change no matter how many times it was told. The man sat alone now. His earlier anger had vanished completely. He looked small, folded in on himself. The weight of what he had done pressed down on him. He avoided looking at anyone, especially the riders who stood nearby without a word. No one shouted at him. No one needed to. The silence was enough. As the day moved on, news of what happened spread through the area. People talked about it in low voices, shaking their heads, asking how something like that could happen so fast. Some admitted they wished they had stepped in sooner. In the hospital room, the girl rested. Her breathing slowed. Her body finally began to relax. Exhaustion took over, pulling her into a light sleep. She dreamed of walking again, of moving freely without fear. She dreamed of strength, of standing tall even when the world tried to push her down. When she woke, the light outside the window had changed. Evening had arrived. The room felt quieter now. A calm settled over her, fragile but real. A doctor returned to explain the next steps. Healing would take time. There would be pain. There would be challenges. But recovery was possible. She listened carefully, taking it all in. She was scared, but she also felt something new growing inside her. Determination. Before leaving, the doctor mentioned again the people who had stayed nearby all day, refusing to leave until they knew she was safe. The girl smiled faintly for the first time. Outside, the riders finally prepared to leave. They did not celebrate. They did not speak much. They simply nodded to one another, satisfied that they had done what needed to be done. As engines started one by one, the sound was softer now, less dramatic. Purpose fulfilled. The girl watched them through the window as they rode away. She lifted her hand slightly in a quiet wave, even though she knew they could not see her clearly. Her journey was far from over. But she knew one thing for certain. She would not walk it alone. Morning came softly through the hospital window. The light rested on the wall, pale and quiet. The girl woke slowly, her body heavy, her leg aching in a deep, steady way. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, piece by piece, until everything made sense again. A nurse entered the room with a gentle smile and asked how she was feeling. The girl answered honestly. She was tired. She was sore. But she was awake, and that felt like a small victory. The nurse adjusted the blankets and explained what the day would look like. Tests, rest, more waiting. Waiting felt harder than pain. She stared at the ceiling and listened to the sounds of the hospital waking up. Carts rolling, voices passing. Somewhere down the hall, laughter broke through, brief and unexpected. Life was moving on even while hers felt paused. Later, a doctor returned to talk about her leg again. The break was serious but manageable. With time, care, and patience, she would walk normally again. The words lifted a weight she had been carrying since the moment she fell. After the doctor left, the room felt quiet again. She reached for her phone and saw messages waiting. Words of concern, encouragement, support. She read them slowly, letting each one sink in. She had not realized how many people cared. News of what happened had spread farther than she expected. Not in a loud way, but in a steady one. People talked about it at work, at home, online. Many focused not just on the harm done, but on the people who stepped in, who refused to let silence win. Across town, the man who had hurt her faced the reality of his actions. The anger that once drove him was gone. In its place was fear, regret, and the heavy understanding that what he had done could not be undone. He sat quietly, answering questions, listening as witnesses spoke clearly and without hesitation. Each word built the truth stronger. Back in the hospital, the girl was helped into a chair for the first time. The movement hurt, but she welcomed it. Sitting upright made her feel more human, more present. She looked out the window at the street below, watching people walk freely, something she now understood differently. A visitor arrived later that day. Not many words were exchanged at first. Sometimes presence mattered more than conversation. The girl felt comfort in knowing she was not forgotten, not left alone to carry the weight of the experience. As the hours passed, she began to think about the future, about returning to her routine, about the fear that might rise when she stepped outside again. The thought made her chest tighten. But she also remembered the sound of engines, the way the crowd finally spoke, the way strangers became protectors. Those memories gave her something solid to hold on to. She realized that what happened did not define her, but how she moved forward would. That evening, a physical therapist visited briefly to explain what recovery would involve. Exercises, support, Slow progress. The girl listened carefully, asking questions, determined not to let fear control her next steps. Outside the hospital, life continued. The street where everything happened looked normal again. Cars passed. People walked by. But for those who had been there, the memory lingered. A reminder of how quickly cruelty could appear, and how powerful unity could be. The man was released later under conditions he could not ignore. He walked away quieter than before, carrying a burden that would follow him long after the day ended. Consequences were no longer abstract ideas. They were real. As night returned, the girl lay back in her bed, exhausted but thoughtful. She replayed the day in her mind, not with fear this time, but with reflection. She thought about strength, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that stayed steady under pressure, the kind that allowed her to endure pain, accept help, and keep going. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of sleep pulling her under again. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more healing, more steps forward and backward. But she was ready. What had started as a moment of violence had grown into something larger. A lesson, a warning, a reminder, and the story was not finished yet. The days that followed moved slowly, one after another, each carrying its own weight. The girl left the hospital with careful steps, supported and tired, but determined. The outside air felt different now, sharper, louder. Every sound seemed to ask for her attention. Still, she stepped forward. Home became a place of rest and reflection. She spent long hours on the couch, her leg raised. Ice packs changed on schedule. Pain came and went in waves. Some moments were manageable. Others tested her patience. She learned to listen to her body in a new way, to respect its limits without giving in to fear. Messages continued to arrive. Some from people she knew well, others from people she had never met. Short notes of support, quiet words of encouragement. She read them all, surprised by how much strength could come from simple kindness. At night, sleep came unevenly. Memories returned when the world grew quiet. The street, the sudden pain, the moment everything shifted. When fear crept in, she focused on breathing, reminding herself that the worst moment had already passed. Recovery was not just physical. It was emotional. She worked through the anger she did not want to admit she felt. She allowed herself to grieve the sense of safety she had lost. And slowly she began to rebuild it. Appointments became part of her routine. Doctors checked her progress. Therapists guided her through small movements that felt huge. Each bend, each lift, each step brought discomfort, but also proof that healing was happening. She celebrated quiet victories. Standing a few seconds longer, taking a step without support, sleeping through the night without waking in pain. No one applauded these moments, but they mattered deeply to her. Outside her world, the consequences continued to unfold. The man faced what he could no longer escape. Accountability arrived not with shouting, but with process and truth. Witnesses spoke. Records were reviewed. What happened could not be rewritten. People in the community talked about the incident with more honesty now. Some admitted they had stayed silent before out of fear. Others said they had not known what to do. Many agreed on one thing: silence had a cost. The girl listened to these conversations when she could. She did not seek attention. She did not want to be a symbol. She only wanted to live her life again. Yet she understood that her story had reached beyond her. It had opened eyes. It had started conversations that mattered. Weeks passed. Strength returned slowly. Her legs still reminded her of what happened, but it no longer controlled every thought. She practiced walking outdoors again, first with support, then alone. Each step outside felt like reclaiming something that had been taken. One afternoon, she returned to a public space for the first time since the incident. Her heart raced. Her hands shook. She paused, letting the fear rise, then fall. She remembered the people who had stood up. She remembered the engines, the calm voices, the steady presence. She took a breath and moved forward. Nothing bad happened. The world did not collapse. People passed by, busy and unaware. Life continued. That realization brought tears to her eyes. Later that day, she received a message from someone who had witnessed everything. The note was simple. It said they had learned something important that day, that they would never look away again. She read it twice and smiled. Healing did not erase the memory, but it softened its edges. Over time, the pain became part of her story, not the center of it. She learned that strength did not mean never being hurt. It meant choosing to stand again. The writers did not remain a constant presence in her life, and they did not need to. What they gave her stayed. A reminder that unity could appear when least expected. That protection could come quietly, without force or noise. Months later, she walked without assistance. Her steps were steady. Her confidence returned slowly, carefully built on experience and resilience. She stood taller now, not because she felt invincible, but because she knew she could endure. The incident became something people referenced when speaking about responsibility, about courage, about the power of showing up. It became a reminder that actions had weight, and that compassion could shift outcomes. For the girl, life moved forward. Work, plans, laughter returned. So did caution. She carried both. One evening, as the sun set and the world quieted, she reflected on how one moment had changed everything. Not just for her, but for many who witnessed it. She understood now that real strength often showed itself after the noise faded. In recovery, in patience, in choosing hope, she took a step forward into her future, steady and sure. The story did not end with pain. It ended with growth, and with a quiet promise to never let fear decide her path again.